Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk about something a little bit different. I'm not going to talk so much about Brexit today, not directly anyway, or our wonderful government. But before I do, I'd just like to say thank you if you've subscribed, and if you haven't already done so and you find what I have to say of any interest, if you wouldn't mind subscribing, I would be very grateful. Now, I see there being three major challenges that we face at the moment, and none of them I can say is Brexit. Brexit is done and dusted. Brexit has consigned us to a very poor future for the foreseeable future. I think I noticed a lot of the pro-Brexit people saying these days that everybody knew it was going to take at least 10 years before we'd see any benefit. Well, I'm not sure everybody voted for the 10 years of austerity whilst we and poverty whilst we wait to see if it's all going to be a success or not. So anyway, no, the things that I think are we should be concerned about, I'm only going to talk about one of them, but they're obviously global warming is the biggest, the most important, the most serious, which should concern us all a lot more, I think, than it is already concerning us. I think we really need to act, and it's a question of our future existence on this planet, frankly. I think we should also be concerned about all the masses of people living in hot countries who are going to start moving north if something isn't done to stop global warming, or to at least stop it getting any worse. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about global warming. The other concern, the second concern that I think we should be very worried about and should be thinking about is what I would call greed and inequality, because we seem to be creating a brand new feudal system whereby a very, very small number of people control enormous wealth, and at the same time so many people are really struggling and are worried about their futures and worried about their livelihoods and how they're going to survive. And this imbalance is just not right. It's morally not right, and I think in terms of social cohesion it's going to be a problem. I think people are going to get a bit cross when they see how extravagantly some people are living, and at the same time they're being squeezed all the time, not only by cost of living, but by taxation as well, which seems to be quite unfair, certainly in this country at any rate. Now, the subject I want to talk about, which I think we should be concerned about, which I think is probably one of our very biggest challenges, is China. Because China is a country which is immensely powerful. It's almost certainly by now the richest country in the world. It's a country which is set on world domination. It's a country which is spreading its wings all over the world, and it's a country which has a lot of momentum, a lot of confidence. And they have said themselves that this century is the Chinese century. They've said themselves that they want to increase their influence all over the world, and even Xi Jinping said, didn't he, the other day, I was just trying to remember what he was called. Xi Jinping said the other day that anybody who wanted to challenge China could expect a bloody nose. Quite an aggressive sort of thing to say, I thought. Now, I've been very fortunate, and I've been able to visit China regularly for the last 30 years, ever since the mid-1980s. And I've been able to see the change, the transformation, this economic miracle that has taken place. And it really has been a miracle. It's been really quite unbelievable. I've been able to think about and to consider what effect this is going to have on the West, the fact that we've let all our manufacturing go to China over the years and become totally dependent upon them for so many products and so on. And I remember when I first went there, and I often think about my first visits to China. My first visit was, I think, in 1985, 86, something like that. And in those days, I went there to go to a trade fair, but in those days it was quite difficult to go to China. You couldn't just go along and get a visa. You had to get a Chinese company to invite you, and then when you got your invitation, you had to take that to the Chinese embassy and then fill out lots of forms to get a visa, and eventually you're allowed to go there. And I remember on my first visits, I was very, very excited that I was going to this country which nobody really knew very much about. It was a bit of a mystery. All we knew is that it had been communist for decades and decades, being a communist country, and that it was very poor. And I remember my first visit. I travelled from Hong Kong by train to the frontier. That's about 25 miles or so. And at the frontier, just across the frontier, there was a town called Shenzhen, which many of you will already know about. And I remember going through the station and all the confusion there, and going through customs or else, and going out in the outside of the station and seeing just poverty. I remember being immediately approached by beggars and cripples and even pimps. And I remember that the buildings were all very run down and very shabby. Everything looked very shabby. There were no private cars. There were lots and lots of bicycles. People still wearing the Mao, what they used to call the Mao suits, like the dark blue pyjamas that people wore. The only cars on the road were taxis, and they were all second-hand Japanese taxis. They're all beaten up, wrecks that would normally go to a scrapyard. The buses were no better. The buses were just junk. But that was the only way to get around. You had to go on by bus or taxi. One thing that did strike me, though, which stuck out like a sore thumb, was an enormous 30, 40, 50-storey Sheraton hotel, brand new Sheraton hotel, all gleaming in amongst all this mess of the town. I went inside, had a look around, and it was just like any other Sheraton hotel, thick, deep piled carpets, and a guy playing the piano, and waiters and waitresses in uniforms all over the place, everything very relaxed and air-conditioned and calm, and all the rest of it. The height of luxury. And I was very puzzled. I thought, what on earth would why did Sheraton build this hotel in this dump? Why would this? Extraordinary. And it wasn't until a short while afterwards that I realised and found out exactly what had happened. And what had happened was that Deng Xiaoping, who'd succeeded Mao, had decided he wanted to experiment with private enterprise, capitalism. And he had designated the area around Shenzhen as a special economic zone where people were able to set up businesses, and where foreign businesses were invited to come and invest and set up in business. And so that was his little experiment. And it worked quite well. In fact, it worked so well that today, just 35 years later, Shenzhen is the 5th richest city in the world. It's a city of 13 million people. Back in the day when I first went there, it had 100,000. They were mostly fishermen because it was a fishing port. They now have 12, 13 million people. The whole city is full of brand new buildings, enormous glass, flash skyscrapers everywhere. The roads are all big, wide, broad avenues. There are manicured gardens everywhere. Everything is spotlessly clean. Everything works. Everything's efficient. Everything is new and sparkling. In 2004, they decided to build a metro. They now have a metro, which they built in 16 years, which is bigger than the London Underground. It's the 4th biggest metro in the world. Bigger than the London Underground, more stations than London Underground, more lines than the London Underground, more greater distance in tracks. And if you stand on the road there, you'll see, if you watch the cars go by, you'll see Rolls Royces and Bentleys and Ferraris and Lamborghinis. If you drive a big flash Mercedes, you haven't made it. There is just so much money there; it's absolutely dripping with money. The idea was that Shenzhen should be the place they should concentrate on IT and so on, and tech, high tech, and indeed it's known as the Silicon Valley of China. But the transformation has been quite amazing. Quite amazing. If you were to go there, you'd be really, really amazed if you haven't already been there. If you go there, you're absolutely staggered by the opulence and the great wealth there. Now, of course, there's a downside to all this, isn't there? And that is that in Shenzhen, and this is happening all over China now, in Shenzhen, everybody is being photographed, and I think they have more facial recognition cameras in Shenzhen than almost anywhere else in the world. And they have databases whereby they have all your information, everything, including your job and your school and your medical records, your interests, whatever societies you belong to, where you go, where you travel, if you have a car and all this, everything is on these databases. So if you do anything wrong, their cameras can pick you out in a crowd of 1,000 people. And if you do commit an offence, the local authority has the power to make it more difficult for you to get another job, or to stop you moving your children to a better school, or to getting a better house and so on. In other words, the state is controlling everybody. It really is a frightening future, what is going on there. And as I say, this is extending right across China. It really is the ultimate authoritarian state. And that aspect of it is very frightening. But of course, throughout these last 30 years, people have got richer and richer. When people are getting richer, they're very happy. When they've got big, flash and shiny, sparkling, enormous shopping malls to go to, people are quite easily pleased and are not likely to dare to complain. Now, I want to give you just one other example of what has happened in China, because it's kind of sums up what's happened all over the country. They sort of started a building spree back in the late 1980s, 1990s, and it's going on to this day. It's an amazing building infrastructure and so on. We, I think, back in 2010, decided that we might want to build a high-speed railway from London to Birmingham. That's 100 miles. And we talked about it for years and all the rest of it. And eventually, building started a couple of years ago, I think, and it's due to finish in 2023. So that will have been, start to finish, 13 years, 14 years. And this railway is from London to Birmingham, is 100 miles long. High speed, it'll be very nice, and the trains will be nice, and the stations will be nice, and all the rest of it, I suppose. Now, in 2008, China decided that they wanted to have some high-speed railways. And so they started to build their own high-speed railway. And they've done that. And in that time, whatever it is, 12, 14 years, they have built 45,000 miles of high-speed rail and hundreds of stations, and all the stations are marble and glass and stainless steel and all sparkling. The trains, of which they must have got tens of thousands, are all like the bullet trains you see from Japan. They all operate perfect timing, absolutely spot on timing. Everything is incredibly efficient. And this has all happened so quickly, and at the same time they built tens of thousands of miles of motorways. They built these fantastic airports, some of the most extravagant airports you can imagine. In other words, they've just built and built and built, but to such high quality and so fast, because they're so disciplined, so determined, and because they are so rich. And they're rich because they sell us everything. You can go now to a shop in Patagonia. You can go to a shop in the middle of Africa. You can go to a shop in the middle of Siberia, and you can bet your bottom dollar there'll be Chinese goods in there, because China is manufacturing for the whole world. I started my first business. I was in fancy goods and stuff, and I used to buy from Italy. I used to go to Italy in the early 80s, and Italy in those days was a country just full of craftsmen, artisans. Everywhere you went, there was, it didn't matter if you're in the middle of Milan or you're in some mountain village, there was somebody working away on glass or metal or china or wood or whatever, or leather or silk. There were all these craftsmen. And then the Chinese started making all these sort of products. And in a matter of a very few years, all the Italian craftsmen closed down and all the manufacturing went off to China. It's bad luck for the Italians, who'd lost all their businesses. But for the rest of the world, everyone was very happy. It was cheaper, delivery was better, more efficient. But this was extremely risky, because it meant that we're all really in the hands of China when it comes to manufacturing. If you think of how much they make and how much we depend upon them, it's not a comfortable situation. And of course the Chinese are well aware of this. When I started going there, I mean, Chinese people were quite modest and quite quiet and quite deferential, but nowadays, I mean, they're really cock-a-hoop. They know they stride the world. They know they're the richest, most powerful country in the world. And I think this is something we have to be really, really very concerned about it, because it's not just that China are doing so much within their own country, but all over the world, in Africa and the Middle East, and also in the Far East and South America. They're going along to one government after another, and they're offering huge loans to build for infrastructure. They're using their own Chinese workers to build, and Chinese companies to build all this infrastructure. Then they're walking away, leaving the countries in debt. And this is not a good thing. At the same time, in return for some of these deals, they're signing up all sorts of mining contracts, and they're gradually taking more and more control. When it comes to the UK, for example, China is investing very heavily here. They've already invested something like 154 billion in UK. They own, for example, the Chinese government owns 10% of Heathrow Airport. They own a huge chunk of Hinkley Point nuclear power station. Of course, the French own the rest of it. We're going to be paying well over the odds for electricity as a result of that. They own all sorts of things, from schools to breweries to all sorts of companies. And the worrying thing is this, that, you know, whatever anyone says, our economy is going to do badly from now on. We've lost really most of our biggest market, the EU market. A huge chunk of it is gone. Small firms can no longer export there. Our farmers are in terrible trouble, the fishermen, all the rest of it. Farmers, for example, as I mentioned in my last video, you know, they've planted crops this year and they've spent tens of thousands of pounds planting all these crops, and they haven't been able to harvest them because they couldn't get workers. Those farmers are not going to do the same thing next year. They're going to say, get rid of the farm. They're going to say, we can't pay the mortgage on the farm, the overdraft on the farm. We're going to have to get rid of it. And very soon you're going to find Chinese companies coming in and just snipping, buying things up all the time. And they're going to see this as a real bargain opportunity. And as an indication of how interested they are in this country, there are at the moment, this year I think, 216,000 Chinese students studying in this country. And they're all looking for opportunities. They're all obsessed with business. This is one thing I can say about Chinese people that I've met over the years. It's not something I find particularly attractive, but they're obsessed with money and business and getting on. And we're no match for them. But of course, now we're Global Britain. What we've done, for example, to put China in its place is we've got our shiny new aircraft carrier, and we've borrowed some planes or leased some planes from America, and we've put them on the aircraft carrier, and we've got a few more boats to go with it, and we've sailed it out to the South China Sea to sail around a bit and let China know that they better behave themselves. But the craziest thing of all, and this is really almost beyond belief, you'd have heard last week that Boris Johnson, he'll do anything to be in the limelight. If he can be on the international stage, on television all over the world, that's what he loves. I mean, everything that is happening, everything that happens is all about Boris Johnson, what he wants, and furthering his career. So he, alongside Joe Biden, I have no idea why he should have got involved in this, and Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister, gave a press conference to announce that we're all going to invest in some nuclear submarines for Australia, to be built in Australia. Nuclear powered, they're not going to be armed with nuclear missiles. And the idea, this is, as was stated, is to keep China in check. It's going to take 10 years to build. Who knows what will happen in 10 years' time. And one of the great things about this, for the British government's point of view, the fantastic thing is that this resulted in Australia cancelling a 90 billion contract with France to build nuclear submarines. yippee, we've managed to sock France in the face. Isn't that great? France, who were asking to stop immigrants crossing the Channel. France, who were asking to agree to, with others in the EU, to agree to renegotiation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It's a great strategy, that, isn't it? You just do huge harm and publicly insult a party you're trying to get a deal with. Anyhow, these three submarines, so we're going to build these three submarines, and they're going to be built in a few years' time. With a bit of luck, I think we might be able to supply some of the bits that go in it, go in them. And these submarines, what they're going to do, well, they haven't got nuclear weapons, they've only got conventional weapons, so they're going to drive around in circles around the Pacific, I suppose, and then if China, if they invade Taiwan, what then? We're going to fire missiles at them? Send a missile to Shanghai? Would be a good idea, would it? Within hours, China would have wiped Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide off the face of the earth. So what are these submarines going to do? How are they going to keep China in check? But this is all part of us being global Britain, isn't it? Working with Australia and America to keep China in their place. Excuse me. It seems to me that talking about military confrontation with China is really quite absurd. China's become so wealthy and so powerful by manufacturing. The only way we will ever keep China in check, if we want to do that, the only way we're ever going to do that is by competing with them. And we can't, in the West, we can't compete with China. We can't set up factories here. We couldn't possibly, we wouldn't never compete. But why shouldn't we? Not us, I suppose. America in the EU much more likely, I don't suppose anyone can take us very seriously. But why shouldn't America and the EU set up similar economic zones in countries like Indonesia or the Philippines or Vietnam? Countries where there are very low wages. And actually compete head-on with China in certain specific industries, maybe making trainers, maybe making clothes, I don't know, whatever. Because that is something I think China would take very seriously. I don't think they'd laugh about that in the way they're going to laugh at our submarines and our silly aircraft carrier. But certainly this whole submarine episode as an example of what our clown of a Prime Minister describes as global Britain is so ridiculous. It's beyond embarrassing. Anyway, that's what I think about it, and if you watch this far, thank you very much indeed. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, if you think it was worth listening to, then thank you very much again, and until next time, bye for now.